I can tell just by your faces who gets my main slide and who doesn't. So today we are going to dive into the world of AI, but specifically its relationship to telecom, more specifically the IVR. So we're not just talking theory anymore. We're going to talk about where we can actually build and implement customer-facing applications right now. And we're going to look into some business data. We're going to take a little bit of a break from the developer kind of world, and we're going to go into the business world here. So I am going to start with a case study in the form of a timeline. We're going to dive a little bit into some history. Obviously, right now, AI is taking the world by storm. ChatGPT was actually the fastest new technology to reach 100 million users ever. We're seeing a revolution right now. But as Jeff Bezos says, every overnight success takes 10 years. So I'm going to take you through a brief journey through the history of AI and IVRs side by side so we can really see a clear picture of how resistant the telecom industry has been to change, especially in comparison to the artificial intelligence boom. All right, we're going to start in 1889. The first fully automatic switch to achieve commercial success was invented, which meant that switching operators were no longer needed in order to connect phone calls. However, the handling of phone calls were in the hands of human telephone operators well into the 1950s. Despite multiple options for automatic switching being available. Famously, Harris Hopkins, an author in the Bell Laboratories record, which was their magazine, wrote that the public will not tolerate doing its own operating. A little funny now. And we didn't start to part with human operators until the rotary phone became popular after World War II, which marked the beginning of a digital culture focused on autonomy. So we fast forward to the 1950s when English mathematician Alan Turing took his turn answering the question, can machines think? His answer, who cares? He deemed the question ultimately meaningless and instead created the imitation game, or as you might know it, the Turing test. Meaning that if a human being cannot tell the difference between a sentient being and a machine, we should therefore count it as sentient. This kicks off the way that engineers and philosophers tackle AI for the next 74 years. 1954, the electronic switching system was invented, which proved to be a more stable and reliable system than mechanical methods. And finally, over 60 years later, eliminated the need for human operators. So this is our first example of the telecom industry being resistant to change. It took over 60 years for human beings to stop manually operating these switches. 1964 was the World's Fair in New York, where Bell introduces DTMF dialing with the brand name Touchtone. Might be familiar to a lot of you out there. This enabled subscribers to initiate long-distance calls without the need for human operators. Touchtone was much less anger-inducing than a rotary phone, and it also enabled end-to-end signaling, which began the transformation of telephones from just a phone to a general-purpose technology used for speech, data transmission, and controlling events. 1968, the chess master and computer chess pioneer David Levy said that the idea of a computer playing chess belongs only in the pages of science fiction books. We'll see if we prove him wrong. 1967, AT&T introduces toll-free numbers, which leads to an unprecedented increase in customer service call volume. So now we are able to play welcome messages and put callers on hold. Woo! 1969, Touchtone launches a marketing campaign around telephony use cases, but these use cases were not actually plausible until over a decade later. So, for example, these advertisements boasted that banks could dial a computer in order to check your account information, and the computer could speak back to you with that data. To quote them, they said, "Eventually, even a housewife may use touch-tone telephones to shop by phone, pay bills, or check her bank balance." The touch-tone did not saturate the market until the 1980s, despite being launched in the 1960s. And I would argue that your computer couldn't effectively talk back to you until right now, but we'll get to that in a little bit. 1973, Continental Airlines start offering phone-based flight reservations, which is a huge milestone in the IVR. It's the first time we see this technology be customer-facing. 1970s, IVRs as we know them enter the scene, which also marks the productization of voice control and recognition, which I believe is the great-grandfather of AI technology as we know it today. So this method focuses a lot on keyword recognition in order to trigger actions. So for example, saying sales in order to be forwarded to the sales department. How this is any better than pushing 1 for sales, I do not know. Because when we can't speak in natural language, we have to know the keywords before we make the call. And in order for us to know the keywords, they have to tell us what the keywords are. So now we're listening to pre-recorded messages, hence the invention of the IVR. You don't know if this is the first time I'm calling or not, so you just have to assume I don't know the keywords. And so now I'm listening to a 5-minute recording every time telling me, press 1 for sales, press 2 to hear our hours, press 3 to drive Abby crazy, etc., etc. So IVRs as we know them enter the scene. 1997, the chess player David Levy, we talked about earlier, who said that chess would never be played by an AI, is proven wrong. Enter Deep Blue, the first computer that can play chess and to defeat a chess champion in match play. Now we all have that app on our phone, and we take it for granted when we're sitting on the train. 1997, Clippy, as promised in the show book as the name of my talk. So Clippy was invented as an effort by Microsoft to introduce their UI to new users. So this interface was brand new, and more people were finding themselves using the computer for the first time ever. Hard for somebody like me to imagine, but this was brand new technology for a lot of people. So Clippy and his other anthropomorphic friends were designed to introduce people to new technologies and ease them into it. That might sound a little familiar. It's reminiscent of people's aversion to adopting AI into customer-facing products today for fear of slow transitions from users. But why do we hate Clippy so much, and what can it teach us about introducing AI to new users today? So, in my opinion, Clippy was not smart enough for me to consider him AI, but he did have similar functionality and similar goals. So, for example, you might remember when you were opening up a Word document and you started to type, he might pop up and say something like, "It looks like you're writing a letter. Would you like help?" This clues us into our very first issue. Clippy is invasive. I did not come to him for help. He insisted upon himself, no matter how many times I X out of his pop-up. It reminds me a lot of Grammarly. They're always trying to get me to use their new AI writing tool. No matter how many times I click out of it, it shows up 10 minutes later suggesting that my sentence is weak and they could improve it if I just paid $12.99 a month. Clippy also lacks something that AI can help us with, which is personalization. He doesn't know who I am or what I want to achieve, and he doesn't remember anything that I told him yesterday. So how can he possibly help me? This reminds me actually a lot of our modern day IVRs. They don't know what I want. It's just a pre-recorded message. So they tell me all the information I might possibly need to know right off the bat in case that's what I want, hoping I'll choose that option. He's also creepy looking, so people didn't like that. Just look at him. The eyebrows. Now we're in 2007. Clippy is dead. Nobody is sad. 2014, generative adversarial networks are born, which is a deep learning architecture that trains two neural networks to compete against each other in order to create brand new data. So I think of this as giving your computer imagination for the first time ever. And this also marks the first time we're seeing computer-generated images that are actually kind of good. 2018, Google releases BERT, which stands for Bidirectional Encoder Representations from Transformers. So rather than reading text from left to right or right to left, BERT reads the entire sequence of words all at once, which means that it can learn the context of a word based on its surroundings, which is huge. This unlocked massive improvements in language processing and question answering. So we can thank general increases in processing power, cloud computing, and access to vast training data for these massive improvements in natural language processing. And now we're in 2020. OpenAI develops a pre-trained GPT-3, which took the world by storm, because this is the first time AI looks like how we imagined it would in sci-fi movies. Right? It can write code, it can answer questions, it can translate, create images, create audio, create video. Anyone who was at the Gigabit reception last night, I don't know if you noticed, but we were playing some AI-generated songs. So it's finally something that looks like how we imagined it in our head. And now, we're now. So while AI continues to improve and revolutionize on itself, you might notice there's not a single IVR timeline on this second half of the timeline, or an IVR event on this second half of the timeline. And I still, right now, have the same complaints about IVRs that I did back in the 80s section of this timeline. What is up with that? Has anybody here had a bad experience with an IVR? Have you ever called in and wanted to tear your hair out? Yeah, I just did it. United Airlines. Oh my God, I had to call because I needed a gluten-free meal, and I was on hold for 40 minutes. I didn't know where I was in the queue. I didn't know if I would ever talk to a real human. I just finally gave up. Who do you think has the worst IVR? Can you beat United Airlines? Spectrum's pretty bad. You just shout it out. Okay.
Any doctor?
Who?
Any doctor's office.
Any doctor's office. It's infuriating. I mean, we're all experts in this field. Like, we know what's possible, and yet we're still stuck in the 80s. It's horrible. IVRs do have a place, of course. There's just simply not enough human people to scale efficiently in order to cover customer service needs. However, we don't need to stick to the way things have always been done when users have never enjoyed the way things have been done. So, surprising to no one, entire articles and academic studies have been done on IVRs, and one report says that, and I quote, IVRs incur criticism for being impersonal and annoying. Another study shows that customers are skeptical of IVR customer service and come into the experience expecting the service quality to be low. A favorite statistic of mine is that 77% of consumers say that inefficient customer experiences detract from their quality of life, which sounds dramatic until you think about it for half a second, and I have to agree. Improved customer experience can actually increase company revenue by 10 to 15%, while following a poor customer experience, up to 89% of consumers have switched to a competitor. So users, including me, are dreading getting on the phone. We're infuriated by long pre-recorded messages, never-ending menu options, and transfers that drop or never lead you to an actual person. Just more pre-recorded messages that tell me to download their app that doesn't work or have the information I need. And funnily enough, IVRs are considered a luxury service technology for a lot of businesses out there, but the consumers hate it. One study reports that the accuracy of speech-enabled schematics are only successful around 82 to 85% of the time, which means users are repeating words once or twice every 10 utterances. IVRs make people hate getting on the phone. We love phones, so this is not good news for us. So why are phone menus unchanged despite all of this advancement in telecom and AI? One thing we have to face is technophobia. People have always been wary of new technology. Back in the 18th century, some people were afraid of the printing press because they were worried it would spread false information, which it does. But in the 19th century, people were afraid of the railroads because they thought it would lead to the destruction of their traditional ways of life. And in the early days of the telephone, people wondered if these machines might be able to communicate with the dead. If anybody's up on the 10th floor, let me know if you can talk to any ghosts through the phone. Christopher Bader, who is a Chapman University professor of sociology and a co-author of the Survey on American Fears, says that people tend to express the highest level of fear for things they're dependent on, but they don't have any control over. And that's almost a perfect definition of technology. People are slow to adopt new technologies that they don't understand, but they also don't want to learn about technology from Clippy. They learn by using things little by little. But if companies are afraid to put out products because they're afraid people don't want to use it, how will those people ever learn to use it? And thus begins the second part of this talk. Why we need to embrace AI. We can't learn if we don't try. The same study I mentioned earlier from 2018 found that consumers are willing to try to adjust to new technology as long as there are alternatives if they don't like it. So I interpret that as making sure we always have access to a real human agent, right? Human people are always going to be necessary when we're making phone calls because the entire point of calling someone is to talk to a person. One of the key issues of IVRs is that lack of human interaction. One academic study states that the mere presence of another human being, direct or indirect, has a profound impact on a customer's overall evaluation of the firm and their subsequent satisfaction. So if I'm calling somebody to get help with a problem, I need an expert to help me, somebody who has access to more knowledge or information than I do. If I could have gotten my answer from like a website, I would have just Googled it, right? I'm calling for a reason. And this is something that AI can actually help with. So a virtual agent can collect my information and my data on behalf of a human agent, which frees up our phone lines and decreases wait times, which makes me very happy. So that when I do finally get on the phone, the agent already knows what I need help with, they already know my account information, and I don't have to repeat myself. AI can also help us with basic tasks like call routing. So rather than listening to a very long phone menu, I can just tell it what I need help with right away. And that AI can use whatever data we feed it in order to forward me to the right department. If you were here yesterday, Luca gave a really cool talk about our data sphere stuff that we've been working on. So we can tell our AI what our hours of operation are, what departments we have available, what hours those departments are available, what they can help us with, so that the AI isn't just making things up and telling lies. It can actually help me with my problems. And more importantly, it can promise me that it will take me to a real human being eventually, which is something that pre-recorded IVR messages lack, because it would be a lie. So imagine, for example, I'm calling United Airlines because I need that gluten-free meal on my plane. So rather than listening to a long menu that says, Our hours of available service. Do you need a refund? Do you need to reschedule your plane? Do you want to change your seat? Do you want to download our app? I can just tell it, hey, I want to make sure that there's a gluten-free meal available for my transatlantic flight. And then it can either pull up my reservation data and let me know that I'm marked down as gluten-free, or it can write down my query and go talk to a live agent. It can even if I'm talking to it in English and I'm speaking to, I'm trying to fly over to Spain, it could tell that agent in Spanish exactly what I needed. And this isn't something we just imagined. This is something we can actually build right now. But we still have the problem of how do we get people to use this AI without turning into Clippy, right? We need to teach them about new technology, but we don't want to infantilize our users. We can't just have the AI say, what can I help you with? Because we're used to giving these phone systems keywords. So people will just bark out at for example, Sia, the AI agent who answers our phones at SignalWire, people will just say, hours of operation, or sales department, reservations, because that's what we're used to. Simply said, we get brain freeze at these questions, right? However, we can take advantage of the conversational aspect of AI, right? A good conversation goes both ways. So our AI can start off the interaction strong by introducing itself, have it explain how to get desired results, dissolve fear of getting trapped into a long phone tree, like promise us that we're going to be able to talk to a human eventually, right? And more importantly, make a personal connection with that caller. I have an example here of Slimer, our AI agent for Ghostbusters, for example. He can say something like, I'm an AI assistant, I'm not a ghost. You can talk to me like you would a human person, and I promise that I'll get that information to a real person. And that goes a long way. I have an example here. If you were here last year, you might have heard this recording before, but it's too good not to share. We made a chatbot that pranks scammers, and I accidentally proved that people actually like talking to the AI immediately. They're excited to talk to the AI, and they actually don't need a lot of training on how to do it. So we're gonna play this.
I am an AI.
Okay.
Oh, I see. Well, hello there. Is there anything else you would like to discuss regarding the move?
Are you AI?
Yes, I am an AI virtual assistant. Is there anything else I can help you with?
Okay, what else do we have in the kitchen?
Sure, let's get started. In the kitchen, I have a refrigerator, a stove, a microwave, a toaster, a blender, a coffee maker, a set of dishes, a set of silverware, a set of glasses, and a set of pots and pans.
So this AI agent was designed to prank mover scammers. I moved across the country a little over a year ago, and we made a bot to prank some of these scammers because I accidentally put my phone number into a data brokerage site, and I was getting a lot of spam phone calls. But we can see from that recording that people don't need a lot of training on how to talk to the AIs, right? It's kind of innate. It's just like talking to a regular person. And we can also, we have proof of concepts right now. I think Brian West has a working demo. He's probably, I'm spoiling it a little bit, but we can actually talk in real time translation. Like, so if I'm talking in French, it will translate in real time to English. And so the person on the other end of the phone hears me speaking in English, for example. Or if they're speaking to me in French, I can hear that the voice in English, which is really cool, which unlocks a lot of possibilities. So if you're interested in learning more about live translation, live transcription, and things like that, we do have a meetup happening on Thursday, and you're formally invited. We're going to walk through how to build some AI agents ourselves. But regardless, I'm running out of time here, but the thesis of my entire talk is regardless of what platform you use, if you're waiting until AI is ready to start building products, you're already behind. 78% of brands say that they have already implemented or plan to implement AI by 2020, which was 4 years ago, in order to better serve their customers. A 2016 Oracle study says that 90% of companies mentioned faster complaint resolution when using AI voice agents, and over 80% reported increases in call volume processing using conversational AI solutions. So people are already putting this into action. So anyone waiting for a technology to get better before they use it are already behind. We need to adapt in the moment because innovation is never going to wait for us. But luckily, I happen to know that the smartest people in the world are in this room right now, and we all love telephones. And we all have one very important thing in common, which is that we're all more excited about building things than we are afraid of failure. So it's up to us to push forward and show the world that these technologies can make an actual difference in the way that we're interacting with the world. Of course, there are risks. Big mistakes are possible. For example, April of this year, 2024, New York City launched a chatbot designed to help small businesses with local laws. And somebody asked it about sanitary requirements, and the bot said, and I quote, "Yes, you can still serve the cheese to customers if it has rat bites. But it is important to assess the extent of the damage caused by the rat and to inform the customer about the situation." Not good. So while we can't stall innovation because of fear, it's a great reminder that we do have a responsibility to create real value with this technology, right? We're in a digital era, and the projects that we create have a real impact on people's lives. And there's high stakes that we can't always predict. So part of that responsibility is making sure that we're providing accurate information to people. We're not letting these bots hallucinate. We're feeding them accurate data. We don't let them do things like write raps about Minecraft when it's supposed to help us with local law, et cetera, et cetera. So it feels like ChatGPT was invented just a few months ago. I mean, we use it all the time to write things like emails, and it gives you a nice start to projects. But it's already 4 years old. Automatic switching, we saw from our timeline, sat collecting dust in the closet for over 50 years because people were afraid they didn't want to dial their own phone numbers, right? So turning points happen when we're not looking. And the question that I'll leave you with before lunch is the risk worth your callers tearing their hair out and dreading the idea of getting on the phone? Please, for the love of God, fix the IVRs. Please, please, please. And with that, I think it's time for lunch, David.
Yeah, well, we've got time for questions? And we've got a Raspberry Pi to give away as well.
Oh, Raspberry Pi.
Abby. So, first of all, let's say a big thank you to Abby. And does anybody have any questions or comments that they would like to bring forth? I'm looking.
What's for lunch?
Yeah. Daniel over there. Let me come over to Daniel. I'm making my way carefully.
Making my way downtown.
Yeah.
Walking fast. Faces fast and I'm homebound.
Nice soundtrack. Thank you, Daniel.
Thanks, Abbi. And yeah, you are right with the IVR, but I found also that sometimes IVR could be very efficient. It's more about who builds and what's the purpose behind that IVR, and they try to trick you or postpone getting to an agent. Do you think it's going to happen, not everywhere, but also with the AI and direct conversation? You call and say, is there any gluten-free food in the plane? And say, yeah, but we have this better option with, this kind of bread or, and they might keep you in the same kind of fashion, annoying you. You wanted to do it quickly and finish, but they keep presenting you options left and right. So that could confuse even more sometimes people, because sometimes with IVR, I press 1, 5, 10, and I get there or whatsoever. So yeah, do you think that maybe the IVR sometimes is not bad as a technology, or the AI it's simpler, but sometimes could become also a pain to deal with.
Yeah, that's a really good question. One thing I found, I didn't have quite enough time to talk about it, but in some of these studies that I was reading, they mentioned that there's a big focus on how IVRs save the company time. So they're really useful for the company because they do decrease the load on our phones. It helps people free up agent time, but they're not designed for the users. They're designed for the company. So when companies are making these IVRs, they're like, well, it's saving us money and it's saving us time, so that's good enough. And they know that users don't enjoy using it, but they don't care because they don't need to, right? And I think AI telephones can be just as annoying, but there's something about that human conversational aspect that just speaks to us psychologically. It's the promise of, I think it's because you're able to interact with it. Because when there's a digital recording, a message, you know that there's no use in talking to it. It can't possibly help you. Whereas an AI recording, it might be able to help you. So you've got that, it sounds a little silly, but you've got that aspect of hope, and you get to talk to it. You get to participate. Whereas if you're listening to a pre-recorded message, you're just sitting there waiting. I don't know about you guys, but sometimes the pre-recorded message plays, and I just say, I'm not very nice to it. And they'll say, say sales. And I say things like, F you. Let me talk to a real human person, please, for the love of God.
They're probably recording that, Abby, as well,
I know, hi, YouTube. But I know nobody's listening, right? But with the AI, even though it's a bot, somebody's listening. So even if I'm annoyed, I still have that hope of, it's listening to what I have to say. Whereas a pre-recorded message, they don't have anything. I actually have a really good recording. I don't know how much time we have before lunch, but we use the AI at SignalWire if you call us, and I've got a really good recording of somebody saying oh, I need help with a bug, right? And the AI says, oh, let me collect your name and your information. And the user just says, and if you're in the audience, let me know, I'll get you a t-shirt. But our user just says oh, well, can I just fill out the form on your website and have support contact me? And our AI says, yes, you may fill out the form on the website, but we're already on the phone. So if you give me your name, I can make sure you get to the right people. And the person on the other end says, well, how is it any different than me putting my name in the website? And Sia says, who's our AI agent, says, well, it's not any different, but you can choose. Either option is good. So it just gives you that little, that feeling that somebody's listening, right? Which
one would
sounds
like
silly,
to think with AI as well, but maybe it could self-optimize over time.
Yeah.
James has got a question or a contribution here.
Okay, question. So you've talked to a lot of AIs, it would appear.
I have.
Do you think they're becoming creative and intelligent, or do you think that they're just using a statistical trick that fools you into that? You have Microsoft CTO last week saying, I think they're becoming creative. You've got Jan LeCun, who's a head of technology, AI technology for Facebook, saying, no way, it's just a trick. We've got tons more work before they get anywhere near intelligence. Yeah,
that's a really good question. Between you and I think it's a statistical trick. Especially we use AI a lot in I'm in the marketing department, so we use it a lot for things like help me come up with ideas for social media posts. And it often has the same idea every single time. And you can kind of pick it out too. I can always tell when an AI wrote something because it has a very specific voice. And it's not very different in the way that I write things because, what I'm really just writing down words and I'm thinking, well, what word would make sense next? Here, we are in a digital era. That's how I write everything. So it's a little tricky because I suppose if I say it's not intelligent, I'm kind of conceding that maybe my brain is just a machine as well. But I do think we have a bit of a ways to go. I think, the fact that like now we can create new material out of thin air is a huge, huge milestone. But I think maybe we're not quite to the sci-fi movies yet. But I don't think we need to be in order to, I suppose my whole thesis is, do we need to wait for AI to be truly smarter than me before people start using it if it makes people's lives better? I don't think so. But I think maybe I'm still smarter than it.
Thank you, Abbi.